Hello, I'm Jeremy Hinks. Welcome to this video, which is part of a series brought to you by Know You More through one or other of the coaches that make up the Know You More coaching community, in this case me. To complement the bespoke coaching services it provides, Know You More offer self-paced learning tools for you to consume as you please. They are called collectively Pause for Thought, and they are typically between 5 and 15 minutes long. They will encourage you with your helpful self-reflection, and also maybe help you to have honest and open conversations with colleagues and friends around issues of interest to you. This one is about what is social threat and how can a scarf help. So let's crack on with it. So the purpose of this pause for thought then is to invite you to think more about what social threat actually is by relating it to your response to physical threat. But having identified social threat, to then think about how you might choose to behave in the face of it. So as I've just said, we'll start out by relating physical and social threats. We'll then look at the SCARF model, which is a model that was described by David Rock, I think around about 2008, one of his first papers about it, and there's plenty of other material available on the internet. And having introduced the model, we'll then look at how you might actually be able to use it. Because the truth about models is they are just models. It's actually your ability to engage with it and make use of it in your everyday life that is of importance. So first then, physical threat. So the first thing to say about this is it's an absolute lifesaver. It's our responses to physical threat is something that occurs beneath our level of consciousness in a split second in relation to when we first realize that threat. And I hope, of course, that the vast majority of us have not truly experienced a physical threat. The truth is that some people have, and some people have experienced them on a regular basis. The reason for their survival will be their immediate response, both physically, emotionally, and cognitively, to that threat. So the things that will happen to us on being threatened, for example, of a physical nature, will be that our bodies will concentrate on those things that are essential to respond to the threat. So increasing oxygen uptake, releasing sugars for energy. So our muscles effectively become supercharged. We adjust our breathing to use the oxygen efficiently. We increase the heart rate to get the blood around faster. And in case of injury, there's the increased capacity for clotting. Equally, we stop doing things that are physically irrelevant in that moment of threat. So things like digestion, urine production, inflammation, and many other things become sort of inconsequential. So our body basically shuts those down. As well as the physical response to physical threat, we have an emotional response, and that will include an inability to empathize. After all, there's precious little point in putting yourself in somebody else's shoes if the person in those shoes is causing you immediate danger. It also has that tendency to remove any reflective response, and we just will become angry and combative. And then importantly, we have the cognitive impact in that we don't have time to think. So it's act first, think later, and that will become significant in a moment. So our cognitive capabilities are effectively reduced in that moment of physical threat, with the only decision to be whether to attack or to remove yourself from the threat. And you can think of that as another way of putting that is also we adopt a win-lose mindset, thinking we are either going to win or we are going to lose in that situation where the threat is manifested. So that's a response to physical threats, and I haven't described what a physical threat might look like, and I think we can identify it, but maybe the point to make about that threat, as I implied, is that it's a rare event for the vast majority of us, and yet our body kicks in and produces all of those physical, emotional, and cognitive changes without us being aware of them. They happen in a split second. Social threat, then, what is that? So it could be something as simple as a conversation. Something we hear, or when we're engaging with another person in dialogue, they could say something that makes us feel threatened. It could be an observation that somebody makes about us, or we hear them making about us, the first or second hand. It could be somebody who, on hearing ideas, seeks to challenge them, and that could be perceived by us as a threatening action. It could be a difference in perception between people, a difference in interpretation. It could simply be a feeling you get in the presence of somebody or in a particular location. Or indeed, it could be a sensory response, something, a smell, a sound, whichever sensory response it is that activates a memory that perhaps triggers a sense of threat. So the key thing here is that social threat is something that is around us all the time, potentially. Different from physical threat, which is a rare beast. But our responses to social threat may not be quite as dramatic, but in effect, they are on this involve all the same changes that I referred to earlier. So there will be some physical changes in your body, and you will feel when in a conversation where you're starting to feel threatened, you'll feel a change as if you were being physical threatened. But the thing that perhaps is of most interest to talking about the SCARF model is thinking about how our cognitive abilities change. So when we are socially threatened, there is a reduction in our ability to process complex data in the same way as there is under physical threat. And if you think about the scenarios I described a minute ago where social threat can turn up, you might see that quite a lot of them are likely to occur in business meetings and in decision-making forums at the very time when you want your best A-game thinking available. You actually lose the ability to actually deliver on that. So if you accept what I've said so far, then you can see there is some value in understanding how we recognize we are being triggered by a social threat and how we can choose to behave differently rather than just to use that phrase, going off on one. So what are the main triggers that are activated by social threat? And this is where the SCARF model comes in, with me or my face nestled carefully in this yellow scarf. You might guess that SCARF is actually an acronym for 5 words that describe the triggers that are activated or may be activated by a social threat. And the first of these is status. So if we feel like our status is being questioned by a person or a situation, we can take that very badly indeed, in the moment, and certainly reflecting on it afterwards as well. So our response would be, where's the respect that I'm due? My position is such that our interaction should be happening in a certain way. It isn't happening in the way I believe it should be, and I believe you are questioning my status because of that. So status is a significant trigger. So is certainty. So a common phrase is that a prime human directive is to be certain about things, and any uncertainty can cause significant unease. And this we see play out in individual level, in group and team level, organizational level, national level, political level. So if there's uncertainty, that can develop into a sense of threat in an individual's mind. And I have certainly some examples in my professional life where I've been uncertain and can look back on those times where I felt a degree of threat. Then there is autonomy. So if we believe, or we have indeed contracted with in our relationship or in our professional work, that we have a certain level of autonomy in delivery of that work, and that autonomy is questioned, then that can antagonize and manifest as a sense of threat with all of the physical, emotional, and mental changes, cognitive changes that I mentioned earlier. So the word micromanagement, if some people might feel that they're being micromanaged, it's often a word that comes up in the workplace. That's because their autonomy is under threat. Maybe a slightly more subtle one is relatedness. So it's an understanding of where you fit in, and if that understanding is not clear, there is a sense of that lack of understanding of relatedness being a trigger for feeling socially threatened. This, unsurprisingly, is often related to change. So if as you move into a new position in the same organization, or move to a new organization, you join a team. So the new joiner will have a sense of unsure of how to relate to the team members, but also the pre-existing team members won't be unsure as to how to interrelate with the new member of staff. And you might be guessing that these 5 triggers are not mutually exclusive. Some of them overlap. So often relatedness is related to a lack of understanding of relative status as well. Relatedness is something that plays out in induction programs in the workplace. And if those induction programs aren't well thought through, then that establishment of a good sense of relatedness takes far longer than necessary, and efficiency and effectiveness is impacted. And the last one in the SCARF model that are described by David Rock as a trigger in responding to social threat is fairness. So if your sense of fairness, either on behalf of yourself or on behalf of another person or on behalf of an organization, if that is impacted, that can manifest itself in terms of feeling socially threatened. So something that is perhaps coming up for you is there are lots and lots of instances where social threat can play out. There are triggers that you will, I'm sure, be identifying with already. Something that is clearly different from physical threat is that social threat is around a lot. And if we respond to it or are triggered by it on a regular basis, then our defense response, that something that has been a lifesaver for us, is being activated on a regular basis. And those defense responses are only designed to function in acute moments. So somebody who is in the grip of social threats, low level, whatever level of social threat over a long period of time, that can be quite damaging for an individual. It might manifest itself as stress, but it can end up as being a factor in more physical illnesses as well. So there's a reference on screen for one of David Rock's original papers, which is a great read. But as I said before, you will find many other resources widely on the web about the SCARF model. But that's define the SCARF, if you like. The next question is, so what? How can I use it? So I'm just going to describe very briefly 4 steps that you might take using the SCARF model. The first is noticing how you are feeling in that, for example, office situation or home situation where you're feeling that that's a sense of not being yourself. So what is going on for you? What's happening inside your body? Is that sense of heat, pressure? What does it feel like? Where are you feeling it? Second thing is to think about what movements, what traits are you showing that the world outside will see. So it might be a movement, it might be the way you look, it might be blinking more regularly, it might be putting a hand in front of your face, all sorts of things. Those things that you do when you're feeling a little ill at ease, and that is a response to some sort of form of social threat. And the third thing is to be thoughtful about what it is that you're telling yourself in that moment of activated social threat, I beg your pardon. So there might be your mind telling you something, that it might be something that you regularly tell yourself that becomes rather louder than it normally is, or you could be telling yourself more incessantly. So what is your mind telling you in those moments? So notice those 3 things, and having noticed them, you can then analyze using David Rock's SCARF model what is being triggered for you. Is it your status, your sense of your concern about certainty, or how uncertain you are feeling? Is it about your autonomy? Is it about your sense of interrelationship and understanding how you relate to other people? Or is it your sense of fairness? Or, of course, is it a combination of any of those 5 primary triggers? And having analyzed on the basis of noticing, you can then choose how you behave on the basis of that trigger or combination of triggers being pulled. And of course, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. And the first to mention is it might be right, and I'm not actively encouraging it, but it might be right for you in the moment to get your job done, to go on the attack, which might be in the social situations, putting your view over very firmly. It might be right for you and for to being purposeful for your organization or for your relationship to step away. By defensive, I'm not talking about passive aggressive. I mean just to step out of the situation. Another choice might be to pause literally for a moment or 2 and to notice, analyze, get to the point where you can choose. You might be able to step away from the situation, looking back on it, and to reflect on what it is that is triggering you, and use that learning in future interactions. And having noticed, analyzed, you can choose to be curious about your response. ask yourself, what is it that is causing you to be triggered, maybe particularly easily in one or other of the SCARF triggers? And having thought about all of those things, you can choose a more purposeful path for you personally, for your team, and or for your organization. So that's noticing, analyzing, and choosing. The fourth element is what can you do about the application of your understanding of SCARF? How can you make use of it? There are many areas which I can only touch on very briefly here, but they're captured under each of these bullet points. So the consciousness of your response to social threat can have a very large benefit on your self-awareness, how you manage difficult situations, and how you respond to them. So self-awareness is a true beneficiary of your SCARF knowledge. The opportunity to look back at your performance in difficult situations, perhaps both socially at work, i.e. enhancing your reflective practice, will be a considerable benefit to you as well. Surfing the Urge is a reference to a particular addiction therapy, actually, in which those who might be struggling with addictions to alcohol and drugs, for example, are trained to actually get to the point where they feel their cravings reaching a crescendo and to step back from that moment. So they surf that urge and resist the desire for having a drink or to take drugs. In the SCARF context, it will be about surfing the urge in relation to your response to social threats. So it'll be recognizing that it's happening and being able to pull yourself back from the edge and to move forward productively. All of the self-awareness, reflective practice, and surfing the urge have aspects that would be powerful in coaching conversations as well, in terms of monitoring your own response if you're acting as a coach and sharing that if appropriate with your coachee, but also in thinking about how the coachee is responding to you. Another area of SCARF is one in which we become more welcoming of challenge, whether if that challenge might be being provided as feedback, it might be being provided as an alternative idea to our own. Very often those situations are activators of a defensive response, which is ineffective or unproductive, I beg your pardon, simply by virtue of stifling innovation and creativity. We need to be open to the challenge of others when we're moving towards developing new ideas and moving towards critical decisions as well. And all of these things I've described whilst having individual benefits, have very considerable positive impacts on the efficacy of teams. And some of these will be covered in a little bit more detail in a worksheet that we produce with our Pause for Thought resources, which will be signposted later on. So that's us moving towards the end of this Pause for Thought on social threat and SCARF. We've touched upon social threat, related it to physical threat and our physiological response to both of those types of threat. Understand how social threat is widespread, albeit perhaps at a lower level than physical threat. But we appreciate that people respond very differently to social threat, both in terms of the degree of their response and which triggers they are most sensitive towards. And we have defined 5 of those triggers under the SCARF acronym. In terms of SCARF itself, we've talked about status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness being the particular triggers. But recognizing those triggers, allowing you to rationalize past responses to social threat and to learn moving forward and to be able to apply that learning. It's also about improving your performance in real time. So surfing the urge, as I was talking about a moment ago. And thirdly, it's about understanding your impact on others, such that you can, as well as getting the best out of yourself, you ensure that you support other people getting the best out of themselves and indeed out of you. So that's it. Don't forget to download our free worksheet. This Pause for Thought resource was co-created by myself, Jeremy Hinks, and Know You More, a community of coaches of which I'm a proud member. If you'd like to find out anything more about my private practice, Alpha Male Coaching, you have the web details there. If you would like to know how Know You More bring virtual coaching to a large community in the private, public and social sectors, please do look them up at www.knowyouMore.com and also look out for their posts on various social media. For now then, thank you so much for your attention. I hope you found this useful and I look forward to speaking with you again. Goodbye.